Shalom, welcome back. So we are working our way through the Rock of Sure Foundation. We're up to book 7, chapter 12 of the Nazarene Acts, and so we'll go ahead and get started. But before I actually get to the text, I think this is a good place to pause and just make a few notes. So this book, Nazarene Acts, is a more recent title to this work. I didn't come up with the title Nazarene Acts. I've heard other people use it, and I think it's much more appropriate than the title that the church has applied to this book. Now, if you want to read scholarly articles on it or research papers or anything of that nature, you have to look it up by the title that the church has given it, which is the Recognitions of Clement. Scholars call it the pseudo-Clementine recognitions because they want you to think, oh, it's fake. Pseudo means fake. The fake Clementine recognitions. And really, I think no one wants you, as a believer, to read this work and apply it to your lives and accept it as what it is, which is Peter's teachings. I believe that there may be some falsehoods inserted into it. This document has passed through many hands and it's been translated and retranslated a few times, so there's probably some corruption that's crept into it. But the base layer of it is I believe, the genuine teachings of Peter. So here we are. There's 10 books in the Nazarene Acts. 10 books. And so we're 3/4 of the way through. We're in the not really the middle of book 7, but we're getting close to the middle of it. And I think there's like 37 or something chapters. We're up to chapter 12. So we're almost halfway through it. And we just now heard the story of Clement and how he lost pretty much his whole family. First his mother and 2 brothers, and then later his father. Now from this point forward, Clement begins to recognize members of his family on his journey. So that's why it's called the Recognitions of Clement. Now normally when you title a book, you select a title that reflects what the book is about. Notice we're 3/4 of the way through the book before we even realize that Clement has a family to recognize. So the book is not about his recognitions. This is the last quarter of the book. The book is about Peter's teachings. And I think that's why the church gave it this title, the Recognitions of Clement. They don't want you reading it. They don't want you to know that it's Peter's teachings. So that's why we've renamed it the Nazarene Acts. I'm not the person that came up with that name. Others have used it before me, but I think it aligns much closer to what the book actually is. The book is not about Clement recognizing people. The book is about Peter teaching the doctrines taught to him by Yeshua. So I just kind of want to get that out of the way. I've explained that in other videos and in different ways, but I still get asked about it. Why do you call it the Nazarene Acts? Well, that's why, because I believe that's a more appropriate title. The same is true of the sermons of Peter. The church named it the Clementine Homilies, as if it is Clement's homilies. They're not Clement's homilies, they're Peter's homilies. In fact, Clement himself, he prefaces the homilies with a letter to James introducing the book. And in Clement's letter, he calls them the popular sermons of Peter. Clement titles his book, and the church removed Clement's title and renamed it the Clement's Homilies instead of the popular sermons of Peter. I have just restored the title to it. So the correct title of the work commonly known as the Pseudo-Clementine homilies is actually the popular sermons of Peter, and it's the proper title because that's the title that the author gave it. Also, this thing with them calling it the pseudo-Clementine homilies. If you follow the most scholarly writings, they believe that the entire New Testament is pseudepigrapha. And we know that Matthew, who wrote the Gospel according to the Hebrews, which is similar to the Gospel of Matthew that we have in Greek. So Matthew wrote the Gospel according to the Hebrews, and then somebody translated it into Greek and changed a bunch of stuff in it and took a bunch of stuff out. So really the Gospel of Matthew that is in your Bible is really pseudo-Matthew. And we don't really know that Mark wrote Mark or Luke wrote Luke. That's just names that have been stuck on these books. So you could call pretty much every book in the Bible, every book in the New Testament, you could call it pseudo. Oh, that's pseudo-Matthew. Oh, that's pseudo-Luke. That's pseudo-John. But they only apply pseudo to stuff like the Clementine homilies because it contains the teachings of Peter. Half the letters of Paul, the textual critics don't think that Paul even wrote. So Paul's letters are pseudo-Paul. I personally think we should just start calling all of these books pseudo if we're going to do it to the Clementine writings. So anyway, there's a lot, I guess, I would say there's a lot of ways in which we have to rethink the way we accept things that we've just kind of taken at face value over the years, if you want to get to the truth. Because you're not going to get to the truth in a church. You're not going to get to the truth by just following these doctrines that we've had shoved down our throats our entire lives. It should all be pseudo. It should all be suspect until it's confirmed by the Holy Spirit. Again, like I've pointed out numerous times, in the Gospel of John, Jesus doesn't say, I'm going to send you a book to lead you to all truth. He says, I'm going to send the Spirit of truth to lead you to all truth. If Mr. King James was going to put out a Bible that was completely, devoid of errant and 100% true from the mouth of God to the pages of your King James Bible, if that were the case, Jesus could have just said, I'm going to send King James to lead you to all truth. And he's going to put out a book, and it's going to be full of truth, and it's going to have all but nothing but truth in it. But he didn't say that. He said the Holy Spirit would lead us to truth. But, why should we follow Jesus' words? All he is the Son of God. Let's follow King Jimmy. So anyway. Alright, so we'll go ahead and get started in chapter 12. I'll step down off my soapbox for a minute. It says, after this, one of those present began to ask Peter that early the next day we should go to a neighboring island called Eridus. This island in modern times is called Arwad, which was not more than 6 furlongs off, to see a certain wonderful work that was in it, namely vinewood columns of immense size. To this Peter assented, as he were very obliging, but charged us that when we left the ship we should not rush altogether to see it, for, he said, I do not wish you to be noticed by the crowd. When therefore next day we reached the island by ship, in the course of an hour forthwith we hastened to the place where the wonderful columns were. They were placed in a certain temple, in which there were very magnificent works of Phidias, on which every one of us gazed earnestly. So we got a couple of names here. Named the island Eridus, and then we got Phidias. So I thought it'd be interesting, maybe, for you to kind of see what we're talking about here. So this is Eridus, or like I said, modern times they call it Arwad. So here's a photo of the island. It's a pretty small island. We got some more photos down here we can blow up, see if I can get that centered. So you see, it's it's a small island, very small. I couldn't find any pictures online of temples that are still standing here that might contain those columns as spoken about. But Phidias, who is mentioned as the person who created the temple. Here's an aerial picture. This is Arvad. You can see it's pretty close to the Syrian coast. Said it took them about an hour to get out to the island, so it's pretty nearby. This city actually used to have a big monolithic wall that went all around the island to protect it. It's one of these wonders of the ancient world. You can see the remnants of it here, I think. But yeah, so that's the island that they're going to. And then Phidias is actually he's pretty well known. He actually constructed the Parthenon. He's a well-known architect of ancient Rome. So here in this was erected 447 to 438 BC. So he lived about 500 years before Peter, so 2,500 years before us. He designed the Parthenon. Here's remnants of a temple to Zeus that he designed also. You can see these huge columns. In the Nazarene Acts, it says that they were vinewood columns. The way it reads, I don't know that Phidias created the columns, the vinewood columns. You can see that most of his, or all of his, it looks like were stone. Like these are huge stone columns. So I don't know if the text is saying that he created the columns or if it was just in a temple. I don't know. Maybe the columns were created by Phidias, but some translations say that they're glass columns. So I don't know. But anyway, that should give you kind of an idea, where they are. They're at this island and they're looking at these columns. And again, like I said, small island. I mean, this is like small town. Probably I live in a small town. And it looks like it's smaller than the town that I live in. So that's where they are. But when Peter had admired only the columns, being nowise ravished with the grace of the painting, he went out and saw before the gates a poor woman asking alms of those who went in, and looking earnestly at her, he said, "Tell me, O woman, what member of your body is wanting, that you subject yourself to the indignity of asking alms, and do not rather gain your bread by laboring with your hands, which God has given you?" But she, sighing, said, "Would that I had hands which could be moved, but now only the appearance of hands has been preserved, for they are lifeless and have been rendered feeble and without feeling by my gnawing of them." Then Peter says, "What has been the cause of your inflicting so great an injury upon yourself?" "Want of courage," said she, "and not else. For if I had any bravery in me, I could either have thrown myself from a precipice or cast myself into the depths of the sea, and so ended my griefs." Then Peter said, "Do you think, O woman, that those who destroy themselves are set free from torments, and not rather that the souls of those who lay violent hands upon themselves are subjected to greater punishments?" Then said she, "I wish I were sure that souls live in the infernal regions, for I would have gladly embraced the suffering of the penalty of suicide, only that I might see my darling children, if it were for but an hour." Then Peter said, "What thing is so great that affects you with so heavy sadness? I should like to know. For if you inform me of the cause, I might be able to both show you clearly, O woman, that souls do live in the infernal regions, and instead of the precipice or deep sea, I might give you some remedy, that you might be able to end your life without torment." Then the woman, hearing this welcome promise, began to say, "It is neither easy of belief, nor do I think it necessary to tell what is my extraction or what is my country, but it is enough only to explain the cause of my grief, why I have rendered my hands powerless by gnawing them. Being born of noble parents and having become the wife of a suitably powerful man, I had 2 sons, and after them 1 other. But my husband's brother was vehemently inflamed with unlawful love towards me, and as I valued chastity above all things, I would neither consent to so great wickedness nor wish to disclose to my husband the baseness of his brother. I considered whether in any way I could escape unpolluted, and yet not set brother against brother, and so bring the whole race of a noble family to disgrace. I made up my mind, therefore, to leave my country with my 2 sons until the incestuous love should subside, which the sight of me was fostering and inflaming, and I thought that our other son should remain to comfort his father to some extent. Now, in order to carry out this plan, I pretended that I had a dream, in which some deity stood by me in a vision and told me that I should immediately depart from the city with my twins and should be absent until he should command me to return, and that if I did not do so, I should perish with all my children. And so it was done. For as soon as I told the dream to my husband, he was terrified, and sending with me my twin sons and also slaves and maidservants, and giving me plenty of money, he ordered me to sail to Athens, where I might educate my sons, and that I should stay there until he who commanded me to depart should give me leave to return. While I was sailing along with my sons, I was shipwrecked in the night by the violence of the winds, and the wretch that I am was driven to this place, and when all had perished, a powerful wave caught me and cast me upon a rock. And while I sat there with this only hope that haply I might be able to find my sons, I did not throw myself into the deep, although then my soul, disturbed and drunk with grief, had both the courage and the power to do it. But when the day dawned, and I, with shouting and howling, was looking around if I could even see the corpses of my unhappy sons anywhere washed ashore, some of those who saw me were moved with compassion, and searched first over the sea and then also along the shores if they could find either of my children. But when neither of them was anywhere found, the women of this place, taking pity on me, began to comfort me, everyone telling her own griefs, that I might take consolation from the likeness of their calamities to my own. But this saddened me all the more, for my disposition was not such that I could regard the misfortunes of others as comforts to me. And when many desired to receive me hospitably, a certain poor woman who dwells here constrained me to enter into her hut, saying that she had a husband who was a sailor, and that he had died at sea while a young man, and that although many afterwards asked her in marriage, she preferred widowhood through love of her husband. Therefore, said she, we shall share whatever we can gain by labor of our hands. And not to detain you with a long and profitless story, I willingly dwelt with her on account of the faithful affection which she retained for her husband. But not long after, my hands, unhappy woman that I was, long torn with gnawing, became powerless, and she who had taken me fell into palsy, and now lies at home in her bed. Also, the affection of those women who had formerly pitied me grew cold. We are both helpless. I, as you see, sit begging, and when I get anything, 1 meal serves 2 wretches. Behold, now you have heard enough of my affairs. Why do you delay the fulfillment of your promise to give me a remedy by which both of us may end our miserable life without torment? While she was speaking, Peter, being distracted with much thought, stood like one thunderstruck, and I, Clement, coming up, said, I have been seeking you everywhere, and now what are we to do? But he commanded me to go before him into the ship, and there to wait for him, and because he must not be contradicted, I did as he commanded me. But he, as he afterwards told me, the whole, being struck with a sort of suspicion, asked the woman her family and her country, and the names of her sons, and straightway he said, if you tell me these things, I shall give you the remedy. But she, like one suffering violence, because she could not confess these things, and yet was desirous of the remedy, feigned one thing after another, saying that she was an Ephesian, and her husband a Sicilian, and gave false names to her sons. Then Peter, supposing that she had answered truly, said, Alas, O woman, I thought some great joy should spring upon us today, for I suspected that you were a certain woman concerning whom I lately learned certain like things. But she adjured him, saying, I entreat you to tell me what they are, that I might know if amongst women there be one more unfortunate than myself. Then Peter, incapable of deception and moved with compassion, began to say, There's a certain young man among those who follow me for the sake of religion and a sect, a Roman citizen, who told me that he had a father and 2 twin brothers, of whom not one is left to him. My mother, he said, as I learned from my father, saw a vision that she should depart from the Roman city for a time with her twin sons, else they should perish by a dreadful death. And when she had departed, she was never more seen. And afterwards his father set out to search for his wife and sons, and was also lost. When Peter had thus spoken, the woman, struck with astonishment, fainted. Then Peter began to hold her up and to comfort her, and ask what was the matter, or what she suffered. But she at length, with difficulty, recovering her breath, and nerving herself up to the greatness of the joy which she hoped for, and at the same time wiping her face, said, Is he here, the youth of whom you speak? But Peter, when he understood the matter, said, Tell me first, or else you shall not see him. Then she said, I am the mother of the youth. Then said Peter, What is his name? And she answered, Clement. Then said Peter, It is himself, and he who it was that spoke with me a little while ago, and whom I ordered to go before me into the ship. Then she fell down at Peter's feet and began to entreat him that he would hasten to the ship. And then Peter said, Yes, if you promise that you will do as I say. And she said, I will do anything, only show me my only son, for I think that in him I shall see my 2 twins also. Then Peter says, When you have seen him, dissemble for a little while until we leave the island. And she said, I will do so. Then Peter, holding her hand, led her to the ship, and when I saw him giving his hand to the woman, I began to laugh. Yet, approaching him to do him honor, I tried to substitute my hand for his and to support the woman, but as soon as I touched her hand, she uttered a loud scream and rushed into my embrace and began to devour me with a mother's kisses. But I, being ignorant of the whole matter, pushed her off as a mad woman, and at the same time, though with reverence, I was somewhat angry with Peter. But he said, Cease what you mean, O Clement, my son. Do not push away your mother. But I, as soon as I heard these words, immediately bathed in tears, fell upon my mother, who had fallen down, and began to kiss her. For as soon as I heard, by degrees I recalled her countenance to my memory, and the longer I gazed, the more familiar it grew to me. Meantime, a great multitude assembled, hearing the woman, who used to sit and beg, and was recognized by her son, who was a good man. And when we wished to sail hastily away from the island, my mother said to me, My darling son, it is not right that I should bid farewell to the woman who took me in, for she is poor and paralytic and bedridden. When Peter and all who were present heard this, they admired the goodness and prudence of the woman. And immediately Peter ordered some to go and to bring the woman in her bed as she lay. And when she had been brought and placed in the midst of the crowd, Peter said in the presence of all, If I am a preacher of truth, for confirming the faith of all those who stand by, that they may know and believe that there is one God who made the heaven and the earth, in the name of Yeshua Messiah, his son, let this woman rise. And as soon as he had said this, she arose whole and fell down at Peter's feet, and greeting her friends and acquaintances with kisses, asked of her what was the meaning of it all. Asked of her what was the meaning of it all. I think I need to reword that some. But she shortly related to her the whole proceeding of the recognition, so that the crowds standing around wondered. Then Peter, so far as he could, and as time permitted, addressed the crowds on the faith of God and the ordinances of religion, and then added that if anyone wished to know more accurately about these things, he should come to Antioch, where, said he, we have resolved to stay there for 3 months, and to teach fully the things which pertain to salvation. For if, said he, men leave their country and their parents for commercial and military purposes, and do not fear to undertake long voyages, why should it be thought burdensome or difficult to leave home for 3 months for the sake of eternal life? When he had said these things and more to the same purpose, I presented 1,000 drachmas to the woman who had entertained my mother, and who had recovered her health by means of Peter in the presence of all. I committed her to the charge of a certain good man, the chief person in that town, who promised he would gladly do what we demanded of him. I also distributed a little money among some others, and among those women who were said formerly to have comforted my mother in her miseries, to whom I expressed my thanks. And after this we sailed, along with my mother, to Antaradus. Alright, so this is probably a good place to stop. We'll be picking it up in chapter 25 next time. So thank you for listening. Shalom.